Welcome to my bike. The reason I'm talking to you on my bicycle today is that I can't talk to you at home because I need to share with you something so secret that I need to be out of the house. Today I'm going to talk to you about what's missing from the 9/11 World Trade Center inquiry, what's missing from the Tic Tac inquiry, what's missing from the Calvine inquiry, and very much, and where I'm going to start, what's missing from the Rendlesham Forest inquiry. So let's dive into a classic way that most films about Rendlesham Forest actually start, and that is on the 26th or 27th of December in Rendlesham Forest. No, cut. Absolutely stop. That is not the way to start a film about Rendlesham. The actual truth of what actually happened at Rendlesham Forest, if you are investigative journalism, actually started in 1945 on the day that World War II ended. And you need to understand that. Rendlesham Forest incident did not start in December 1980, it started decades before. And then the second thing that gets me absolutely livid, yelling at my screen, you know, on wonderfully made films like the new Capel Green film and all the great documentaries about Rendlesham Forest, they all say, in Rendlesham Forest. I'm sorry to use this word, but off. Why? Why Rendlesham Forest? Why did aliens in a triangular UFO craft, or whatever happened, appear in a forest in Suffolk called Rendlesham? Why not the White House lawn? Why not Trafalgar Square? Why Rendlesham Forest? And that's the nub of what I'm going to say today. You have to ask the background big question to these stories. It is no damn good just starting a story in Rendlesham Forest. Excuse me, hill. You have to understand why the F was it Rendlesham Forest? And the second big question that you as an investigator, a journalist, a YouTube filmmaker have to ask is why December 1980, because both those questions reveal answers which actually reveal about 75% of what actually happened at Rendlesham Forest. I mean, the rest is all anecdotal evidence from people with varied stories, and I think that's also very interesting, very subjective stories which don't actually match up. But that's actually emblematic, probably, of what actually happened to them. They were either messed up in their heads, or they were messed up by the US Air Force deliberately to cover something up. Why would the US Air Force actually mess with people's minds if they weren't covering it up? If it was just aliens, that's just aliens. What can you do about aliens? Not much. But no, why Rendlesham? And I think you know the answer to that. So I'm not going to actually go into what actually happened at Rendlesham or World Trade Center or Calvine or Tic Tac. What I'm going to do today is ask these questions. What was the background to the story? The background that people are ignoring. So let's go on to Tic Tac. Everybody starts, David Fravor flew his F-18 out towards a Tic Tac. Well, hang on a minute. You need to go back a long way on that story and say, who's David Fravor? What was he doing there? And where was the Tic Tac? Well, the Tic Tac was in something called a military operational area. And the Nimitz crew, David Fravor and the Princeton and everybody, were doing an exercise in the, I think, the south east quadrant of this MOA. And in the northwest of the quadrant, they spotted something that they didn't know. It was an unknown aircraft. Why didn't the Princeton commanders contact the controlling authority at San Diego? Because MOAs can be used by multiple people simultaneously. San Diego would have known who they were. This is the conversation that they should have had that I've never heard. Princeton, this is Princeton. Is that San Diego control? Over? Yes. Go ahead, Princeton. Radar operators on our ship, the Princeton, are seeing unknown aircraft northwest of us. Can you confirm who they are, and are they a factor for our operations? And San Diego would have said, Roger that, Princeton. Yes, we have a second agency using the MOA today, simultaneously with you. They are vectored to stay in the northwest quadrant while you are in your logged area in the southeast. The craft that you're seeing on your radar are no factor. But that didn't happen. No. Unilaterally, by themselves, the Princeton sent out 2 F-18s to go and look for something in a multi-use MOA. Why didn't they contact San Diego Control? The deal is with MOAs is that you can do multiple aviation testing, different agencies, different defense authorities, different contractors, can be using the MOA at the same time. They don't need to talk to each other. In fact, they probably don't want to talk to each other, but they must talk to the controlling authority. So why didn't the Princeton query who the unknown aircraft, the weird types of aircraft they saw going from sea level to 80,000 feet, why didn't they ask San Diego, who are they? Are they a factor for our live fire exercises? And San Diego would have told them the answer. But I've never heard anybody on the Princeton have that conversation. That's the kind of question that you need to ask as a good journalist. Where was the Tic Tac? The Tic Tac and the Nimitz and the Princeton was in a multi-use MOA. Well, it was in some airspace controlled by the FAA to keep military craft away from civil airliners. Would an alien actually be in FAA-controlled airspace? I doubt it. I think they would appear anywhere they needed to. But could there be a simultaneous test going on by another agency or even the Navy in a need-to-know basis in a different sector of the MOA that the Princeton and the Nimitz didn't need to know about? Yes. Suddenly that puts a whole new light on that story. Now, let's move on to the Calvine story. Now, David Clark is a very good journalist. He's tracked down the guy from the MOD who had the original picture, and he's done so much research into the two guys who took the picture. But, I'm sorry, David, you're ignoring one enormous big picture journalism question is, where is Calvine? Calvine is the Southern Highland Military Operational Low-Level Flight Test Area, where you, as a military operation, can test exotic craft over the rural Highlands of Scotland. If you ignore that, you're ignoring half of the story. Sure, there was 2 guys who took a photograph, but why was the craft there? Well, again, it was being tested in secure military airspace that was clear of civil traffic. An alien flying saucer wouldn't be in Calvine specifically. It would be on the White House lawn. It would be in Trafalgar Square, or wherever you want to call it for Britain. Please ask the big questions and you'll get big answers. Now, moving on to the thorniest issue of all time that everybody totally ignores, and that's, it's going to be controversial, and I don't care being controversial, as you know. What actually happened in the World Trade Center? Why did the Twin Towers fall down? And again, everybody says, on 9/11, either a plane or Project Blue Beam or a directed energy weapon from space. I don't care what it was. Why did the Twin Towers fall down? Well, they fell down because they were always going to fall down. Everybody knew that they were the most different, the most strange, unlike any other skyscraper in New York. The Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, and every other skyscraper is steel and concrete construction of solidity. The World Trade Center is the hollow tower. It's a hollow shell held up by an exoskeleton. It was so radical that the actual engineer and architect who designed it refused and never did go to the top floor because he was so scared it would fall down. The New York Port Authority knew if anything hit it, it would fall down. Con Edison, who had a facility at the base of the World Trade Center, built a giant metal structure around their transformers and power station because they knew the World Trade Center was going to fall down if it ever got hit by an airplane. The FAA knew it. John F. Kennedy Airport knew it. It was very much a target, and very sadly, so did the terrorists know it. And that's why it was a target earlier on, before 9/11, when somebody planted a bomb in the basement. Because that building, if you just sugar it, it's going to fall down. Did you know at the top of the World Trade Center, it actually wobbled by 11 feet? Because the whole thing was the hollow tower. At the time they built it, they actually wanted open plan offices, and there is nothing inside it. Now, that wasn't the original plan. Originally, as a backup to the exoskeleton of the structure on the outside, they were going to have a central single lift shaft that went from bedrock in the basement to the top floor. But the lift company, the elevator company, let them down. There was no way that at the time they could design an elevator that could go in one shaft that height. So, breaking the plans completely, they had to split the elevator shaft into three. So no longer connecting the second and the third to the ground floor. It was floating, not holding up the central core of the building. So when whatever happened, and I'm not interested in what happened, whatever happened, you now have a picture of a building which was potentially lethal, and people knew it. And where do you hear that? Where do you see that on the news? Where do you see newspaper articles discussing the background? Where do you see YouTube saying the Tic Tac was in a military operational area which could be shared by Lockheed Martin? I'm not saying it's his Lockheed Martin, I'm just saying it was in one that could be. Where do you see the British newspapers saying that Calvine was in the Southern Scottish Highlands military test zone? They don't. Where do you see the Rendlesham Forest incident actually talk about what was in Suffolk? Why was it Rendlesham Forest? What was outside of Rendlesham Forest? Orford Ness, Bawdsey, Sizewell, and Martlesham Heath, forming a triangle of British physics defence laboratories. In the centre is a piece of British government woodland called Rendlesham Forest. If you ignore that and say, in Rendlesham Forest in December 1980, and why December 1980? December 1980 was in the middle of the Cold War. December 1980 was after a very burgeoning strategic defense initiatives had started. SDI was not a Ronald Reagan program. Ronald Reagan was a hawk. He actually called the Soviet Union the evil empire. Jimmy Carter, the previous president of the United States, was a dove, and he started SDI. He wanted a defensive dove program that Ronald Reagan inherited, and we think publicly that SDI or Star Wars started in 1982. Oh no, it didn't. By 1980, the SDI program was fully formed and was looking for exotic physics to actually make it work. The new Margaret Thatcher government and her Defense Secretary, John Nott, were desperate to earn US dollars. And they knew that the MOD and Plessy and Marconi and people like that in Britain had advanced physics that they wanted to sell to the Americans. By December 1980, they were prepared to actually demonstrate on a piece of UK government woodland surrounded safely by US Air Force personnel called Bentwaters and Woodbridge, their technology. And you can get those answers by asking the question, why Rendlesham Forest? Why December 1980? Why was the Tic Tac seen off the coast of San Diego? Because it was in a military operational area. Why was the Calvine craft tested in Scotland? Because it was in a military operational area. Nobody asks those questions. Journalists, YouTube, filmmakers need to ask those big questions because they offer you big answers. Well, I hope you enjoyed my sunny bike ride and my rant against poor journalism. And also some very big possible answers. And I don't have all the answers. I just ask big questions because the truth is out there.